Everybody logged in? Ready to go?
Holly's under individual consideration. She just texted that she's sick and wants continuance.
Oh, maybe you will go.
It is
23. Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2 o'clock. Welcome to the February Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Taylor Fudge. I'm the chair of this particular commission, and today we have what appears to be a relatively light agenda, but my goal is to get everyone out of here early as we are continuing to battle Cold Mageddon. As a reminder, please limit individual conversations during this meeting. This will ensure that commission members and applicants can hear one another. Please remain quiet until you're called upon, and when you do speak at this podium up here, please state your name and address for our record. Before we vote on each item, we will ask if any members of the public wish to speak. Looks like we've got several in attendance today. Speakers are given 3 minutes to relay information to commission members. Please be thorough, but also please be mindful of your time as well. The agenda and documents for today's meeting are located on the PrimeGov website. If you are following along online, select the agenda on the right side of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting to see what we are discussing. Written comments received more than 24 hours before today's meeting are posted online and were shared with commission members. And at this point, no new materials will be shared with the commission. So if you brought something with you today, please keep it at your seat. We cannot take it and accept it up here. Keith or Mark, can you guys please call roll?
Taylor Fudge.
Present.
Commissioner Corbin.
Present.
Commissioner Gaines.
Present.
Commissioner Meacham. Commissioner Milner.
Present.
Commissioner Poore. Commissioner Ramey.
Present.
Commissioner Jordan.
Present.
And Commissioner Raymond Phillip.
Okay, so we got 6 people in attendance. Sounds like we do have quorum. Looks like procedures for today's meeting are noted in the agenda. If anyone's unfamiliar with this process, I would refer you to that particular section. There are 2 items that we like to note specifically regarding the meeting process. This involves certificates of appropriateness and appeals. Looks like we have Commissioner Poore joining us up here. Do we need to do another roll call, or how does that work?
We'll just note that she's present.
Okay, Commissioner Poore is here and present. Regarding certificates of appropriateness, after an application is approved and the 10-day protest period has expired, the HP officer will mail the CA to the applicant. City construction permits cannot be issued until the CA is issued. Please contact HP staff for final design review inspection or to withdraw items that will not be completed. Regarding appeals to the Board of Adjustments, any person aggrieved by a decision granting or denying a CA may appeal to the Oklahoma City Board of Adjustments. All appeals shall be made within 10 days of the commission decision by filing a written notice of appeal with the clerk of the Board of Adjustments. That takes us through our our call to order process. We are now, Katie, is there any news from the Office of the Historic Preservation Officer? Anything we need to move today?
Nothing. Well, the only one thing to report, I can do it here at this point on the agenda, is that, and you all should have gotten an email, but we have a date set for a commission committee training, March 24th. It's a Friday. It'll be in the morning like the previous one, and we anticipate being at the convention center again. So as we've said before, if there's particular content you all would like to see included in that training, please let us know. And you'll get more detailed information about the agenda as that gets closer. We do have, when we get to this point, we have a new request for continuance. So when we get to that place on the agenda, we'll report that out.
Perfect. Let's move on to acceptance of the minutes. Have my fellow commissioners had a chance to review the minutes from the January 4th meeting? And if so, do we have any questions or perhaps a motion to approve or modify?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Gaines. We have a second.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Jordan. All in favor? please vote in PrimeGov. We need to vote, or just, no. Oh, I'm sorry, moved by Commissioner Gaines, seconded by Commissioner Jordan. Okay, we're going to do a verbal vote on accepting of the minutes.
Sarah, hold that until second on motion. Oh.
I haven't either. What's that?
It should be working now.
There we go. Why did I get a chance to vote? Okay, that minutes were passed unanimously. Katie, anything from code enforcement?
Nothing in particular to report. As always, you guys have the code enforcement report included in your packet. If you ever have questions about any of those notices of violation, feel free to reach out to staff or to the city's action center for more information.
Perfect. Looks like we do have one continuance and one uncontested request under item number 5. Anything else we need to discuss there?
No, so we have one uncontested request for a continuance to March 1st. And then under new requests, item D3, HPCA 23-00004 has requested a continuance also to March 1st. So we need a motion and a vote on each of those.
Okay. Can I entertain a motion to continue HPCA 22-00166 to the March 1st meeting?
Yes, I will motion to continue that.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Jordan, second by Commissioner Remy. Please vote in PrimeGov. Okay, that motion is passed unanimously as well. We also have HPCA 23-00004, 601 Northwest 42nd Street, that has requested a continuance to the which meeting?
To March 4th. I believe Commissioner Corbin wasn't able to vote, or? Do what? Okay.
First.
So we may need to do a verbal vote just for Commissioner Corbin on that previous item. Oh, for the minutes too.
Okay.
Okay. So Commissioner Corbin votes yay on both the minutes and the uncontested request, and we just need to go back and clean that up in the minutes.
Perfect. Okay, are we ready for a motion to move HPCA 23-00004 to the March 1st meeting?
Sure thing. I will motion to move that one as well.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Jordan, second by Commissioner Remy. Please vote in PrimeGov. Commissioner Corbin votes yay. All right, that also passed unanimously. Let's see.
Commissioner Jordan's didn't show that time.
Jeez.
sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
How did you vote?
Well, it hasn't actually allowed me to vote yet, which
Okay.
is why, but
What is
I'm
the
in
green?
support.
Okay.
What does the green slash through mean?
I don't know.
That's a new one.
Maybe it means she motioned it, so we're making an assumption.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a vote.
Not a vote.
It's colored in when there's a vote.
I don't know.
Okay, Commissioner Jordan did vote yay on that particular item. So, yeah, exactly. I apologize, guys, we're having some technical difficulties today, so please bear with us. It must be the cold weather outside. Let's see, that takes us through continuance announcements and requests. Katie, anything from the public hearing session under dilapidated structures and National Register nominations?
We have no items under either of those sections.
Perfect. Looks like we have 4 items on the consent docket. Have you all had a chance to review? And if so, is there any that we want to pull? And if not, can we entertain a motion to approve the consent docket?
Public that wanted to say anything?
So moved.
Sorry about that.
Anybody from the public wanted to speak on any of the items?
Oh, I don't know that we've ever asked that, but I will. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak on any of the items from the consent docket? Okay, perfect. So we had Commissioner Gaines, motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Remy. Please vote in Prime Gov. And it is not allowing me to vote right now. I don't.
Is this going down?
Should we just do verbal votes?
Yeah.
Amber, or Commissioner Corbin, would you like to vote yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think we ought to move to just a verbal vote for each one of the items that we've got coming forward, because it seems like we're having some challenges. We only have 2 cases for individual consideration today, and we will go ahead and move to the first one, which is HB. Did I miss something?
No, was the consent docket approved?
Did we get the consent docket approved?
Yes, it just popped up. It just popped up with there.
It was approved.
Yep.
Moving a little fast today. Okay, so we are moving on to item number HPCA 20-00181 at 104 Northwest 20th Street.
This is in Heritage Hills East, Ward 6. Consideration and possible action on application by Colton Ashley for Tim Morton Trillium Holdings for certificate of appropriateness to 9 revise item 1 construct addition required and 10 revise item 3 replace front porch deck required. The commission heard this previously and approved an extension on the CA, but continued these 2 items. The applicant has indicated that they will go back with a front porch matching the previous historic condition, and so staff has recommended approval of that. We are still lacking complete and accurate documentation of the addition as is currently proposed and has been constructed. So staff has recommended another continuance for that item. They have 1 continuance remaining at this time.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Hello, can you please state your name and address for our records, please?
Tim Morton, 104 Northwest 20th.
Excellent, good to see you again.
Glad to see the excitement on everybody's faces today.
Oh,
'Cause I
yeah.
need y'all to be nice to
Happy,
me.
happy to have you here. Okay,
I believe I uploaded pretty accurate renderings on what was proposed and what we have now. I know I heard before I came up here, y'all said that you still don't have the information that you need. So what information am I lacking?
Katie, what information do we need from this applicant on this particular project?
I sent in all new floor plans, site plans, elevations. We kind of went back and forth.
I think we were looking for what you all have done kind of to date, if I recall correctly, and then talking us through kind of the remediation of the plan that you all have in place. If I recall correctly, what was built was not what was approved, but was actually previously denied
Correct.
or modified. And so I think for us, or at least for me, want to work through what that remediation looks like and where we're at with the scope of the project.
So what's there now, if you look at what was originally denied, is actually, it does differentiate from what was denied originally, also by error on our side, but I think it erred in the right direction. From everything that I see measurement-wise, I know that we're allowed up to 750 square feet. I think we're at 835 now in addition to, which takes us about 85 square feet above guidelines. Obviously, our main goal is to be able to keep what we have without having to restructure everything. So that's kind of what I'm asking for forgiveness on, I guess.
So it looks like the front porch has been recommended approval. I believe that was just modifying the direction of the planks and the boards. Is that already completed?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're in the process. We've pretty much completely stopped construction, just awaiting all this. I didn't want to have, one of my crews out there to just work on the deck whenever they can do it while we're doing, the rest of it, depending on which direction this goes.
So what would it take to remediate this and get it back to the condition that it really should have been built in the first place?
Aside from, we'd have to redo the framing, the roof, obviously all the plumbing, everything's in slab, so we're busting concrete again, we're relocating all the plumbing, redoing the electrical, then it doesn't fit in with the rest of the floor plan, so all the interior framing is getting redone. It would be a very, very expensive fix,
Sure.
put it that way.
The big challenge that I've got is I don't want this to set precedents. My main concern is that somebody watching, the millions of people that are watching this.
That guy got away with it.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. And I don't want people to think that this is a strategy that they can use to deploy and skirt the rules of the commission.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
I said it was an honest mistake, and with me, I have several superintendents that work underneath of me, and we had 2 sets of plans. One of them got built, and the crazy part is the one that he wasn't supposed to build still didn't even get built right. So here we are. But
Yeah.
and also, kind of like in my defense of why it would be even more acceptable to keep what we have there. If you look at both, like it's that that one corner that's missing that was supposed to be blocked off. So at that point, we were going to pour the same way, and we were going to leave that like as a porch or something like that, instead of having square footage on the house. So it's not something that's going to be, road visible. It's not really going to affect the look of the structure. That one
Yeah.
corner right there, kind of where you see the electrical panel, is the part that's supposed to be shaved out and missing.
I guess for me personally, I don't take,
I think that looks better than what was originally having that weird L-shaped cutout look.
and I, the extra 85 square feet to me is not a huge, it's not a deal breaker, but I think where I keep going back to is what kind of precedence does this set going forward? What unique circumstances can you give this commission to kind of help us along in this process? I mean,
Y'all
unfortunately.
gonna get me fired.
I don't want you to get fired either. Any other questions, thoughts, considerations?
Yeah, I mean, I think to cut to it, so we're serving the city to make sure the guidelines are followed. So when guidelines are not followed, we need a special exception. We need a reason or justification. And so I think what's lacking here isn't, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, it's not documenting what you're proposing versus what was approved. It's give us the reason why. Why is the 85 square feet acceptable in this specific case? Why can we deviate from the guidelines here, and because it's already built is not a special exception? So we need something for contextualism, roof.
I really believe that having that extra section on there is going to give you a much more accurate historical look. I mean, you're not going to find a historical home that has what was originally approved, that has that large L-shaped cutout, especially on that side of the house, which I don't even think was well thought out. So really, I think even if I do come up with the funds and be able to fix it and go back to what was originally approved, which is going to take even longer, it's going to stay in a dilapidated state longer, obviously, because then we're going to be saving funds to make up for the error. But I think what you'll end up with in the end is going to look less historically accurate than what we will have here, as long as it's finished out to your standards, especially just because of the shape of it. Now, if we were bringing the whole house back in and it was keeping the same square shape and kind of looked like a house instead of something that somebody just cut a whole corner out of to try and save square footage to meet guidelines, I think it would do the whole neighborhood and the property itself more justice.
Can you clarify why, I mean, I sympathize with your position, and the goal of this commission is never to create a giant financial hindrance for somebody, but to kind of echo what Taylor said about the precedent, it's that it is kind of a dangerous one to allow somebody to do something and then ask for forgiveness and, you know, play on the sympathies of me not wanting to put you in a bind. But walk me through how it got this far down the road before somebody was like, this actually was like, you know, I mean,
So
how did
everything
it
that,
get to the point of no return?
everything that you guys have now, which is going to be all of your new revisions and stuff, is stuff that I have personally went back through. I took the CAD file and everything from our architect. I altered all of them to match what we have. Whenever this property was purchased, I was part of the original purchase, part of everything, dealt with Bill, who it was at the time, kind of, hey, this is what needs to be done. I put the original packet together. I was kind of in correspondence with Angela. By the time that we hadn't had all of your framing, all of our plumbing, slab was poured, by the time that I had ever even recognized it, honestly, and at that point, I didn't know that it was going to be that much of an impactful deal just because of the way that it was shaped, everything else. Now I do understand how stringent everything is, obviously. So, you know, and again, one of the forgiveness things, yeah, of course, at that point, once we've already had it framed, had a roof on it, like, okay, well, it's an extra, you know, however many square feet, it's not going to be that big of an impact. Obviously it is, and I would like to keep it the way it is, you know, that's the main goal, but.
So is staff's issue that we are missing current and accurate drawings with which to be able to approve what's there?
Yes, that's, I mean, the change from what was approved is a concern, but also, like, if you look at the elevations that we have, they'll show windows where you can tell there currently are not windows as built. We have construction materials that are not adequately documented, and we need to
So I
confirm
did
that.
put in the elevations, that is a proposed, what it will look like if approved. The reason why you're seeing windows that aren't in the current elevations is because I did speak with Angela about your guidelines. Like, I have that one main window, if you look where the kitchen is, on that east side of the addition, we are going to add another window to help complement that one so that you don't have such a large section without a window in it. So if approved, what you guys have is what I would alter the structure to meet those guidelines. That would be your finished product.
And I think then we just also would want to confirm that materials either are what was approved originally, or if not, we need to confirm that any new materials also meet the applicable guidelines for new construction. Windows, siding, doors, et cetera.
So how has the commission, and maybe this is a bad question, in previous years dealt with situations where it does appear to be an honest mistake, and I really struggle with it.
I think that, I mean, your decision has to be based upon whether or not you think what is proposed still meets the guidelines and meets the intent of the guidelines and is appropriate. And, you know, the commission's job really isn't to evaluate whether it was done in good faith or bad faith, or whether they're a nice person, or, you know.
Sure.
So unfortunately, the decision just has to be, is this still something that we can approve, that we would have approved had it been proposed without having already been constructed?
And you have to have findings. So at the end of it, if you don't have a finding to support the decision that you made,
Yeah.
and it's appealed, then you don't have anything to give to the appellate review
Sure.
body. So whatever you decide, and hear very carefully what Katie is saying, that if you don't have a finding to support it, then you can't go that direction.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm saying, is it's not this commission's responsibility to have that finding. It's your responsibility to make that case for that finding. So we can steer you in certain ways, like looking at what is the impact on the overall context of the neighborhood? What is the impact of the roof line relative to the adjacent properties? Is it visible from the public right-of-way? If so, from what vantage points? To give us the case on why the 85 square feet is appropriate for this property. So you've got to make that case.
I think we need that from you in order for us to really be able to support a decision of approval. I don't think, without that, I don't think we, and I haven't heard it today. I don't think I've heard that yet.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so the things that Katie's talking about, validation of materiality, validating that everything, I think I appreciate your clarification on adding the windows, but answering staff's questions on clarity is the first piece, and then giving us the finding is the second piece. And I think those two things are what are kind of the linchpins for this case to get it approved.
For him to move forward, I mean, this was complicated last month too.
I'm going on like almost 3 years now. So
Yeah.
It's a complicated
I
project.
mean, I personally do not have an issue with the additional square footage or the current roof line as is. But yes, for, just to make this on the up and up and make sure that we're following the correct process, I think we would have to get everything answered and clarified and have some reasoning behind it. But I think it might be worth some guidance from the commission while he's here, or since it is such a
So as
tricky
far as
scenario.
everything else that you have in the packet, is that, as we move forward, is that at least usable? So at this point, do I just need like a written statement explaining all this, that'll help? This is why I think it should be accepted, kind of that sort, or do I need to keep?
I think I think one, we can approve the floor today. I think what it sounds like is we needed a continuance on this addition. I think during that continuance period, I think you've got to come up with unique circumstances as to why that 85 extra square feet was built, why it's necessary to keep that there, and what how it kind of fits in contextually with the rest of the neighborhood.
Okay.
So almost like kind of forget about the old approved previous and now start fresh kind of with what you have and make sure it meets to the best of your abilities, the windows and everything else, except for maybe that 85 square foot addition. You need to make a unique circumstance for that that's how I'm kind of.
That's what I'm thinking too, and I think everything else in the project has to be to the letter of the guidelines, with the exception of this 85 feet as you're, kind
Right.
of completing this
I agree.
extra piece.
I have a question for Angela. Did you say in the beginning that you had been talking with her since last month?
So, yeah, we started this whole process during the height of COVID. So last month was the first time I actually got to come be in person, and get to be a part of the process. But we're going on over 2 years now.
Well, I just wanted clarification because I remember last month when we were here, we said you need to provide more materials.
Correct. And
You said you talked with Angela, but now understand we don't have those materials. So my question is, did you guys have that conversation? Why are the materials that were requested not here this time again?
And you can even ask her. I revision. She would send it back, say, hey, you're missing this. She's been super helpful on that. Small stuff like this window is actually bigger than this window. I'd go back, look at my elevations, go, oh yeah, you're right. I'd resize, send back again. I believe what you have now is, to my understanding, is there anything specific that you guys see that you're saying, hey, this isn't enough information?
So when you look at your original approved packet, and we look at what we have now, there is a change in materials. The first thing that comes to mind is that you've switched from the approved cementitious siding to wood siding, which is fantastic. We don't have an issue with wood siding.
Originally.
Pardon?
I thought we were doing wood originally. Did I do cement?
Sounds like that's where
So-
maybe the research needs to come into play within the next 30 days.
The types of materials that are submitted are, to some extent, not always complete, and then when we add to them, they are changing. It's kind of a mutation that is ongoing between us, so we really need to nail that down. But the other thing that I would very much like the commission, if possible, to comment on is differentiation of the new addition on the west side of the house, where there is currently very, very little. It's an inch or two as far as this proposal goes. Whereas initially, we had a larger form, a wider form that was outset rather than inset to accommodate the changes that were necessary on the inside to make the house habitable. We now have a straight line. I need
Okay.
you to be okay with that or to assist in direction on that.
Okay. What can we do to differentiate the back part of the property on the west side of the house from the
Well-
front part of the house?
Chairman, I was just going to say, if you're asking us to make these exceptions, I think, for me,
I had,
my...
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, according to staff, you haven't, so I think my preference would be to do a continuation and make sure that if you come back to us wanting us to make exceptions, then having that paperwork, because I know sometimes it's hard to get them all, and I'm not normally that a stickler to make sure it's all, as long as we can tell what it is, but in this circumstance, I would say yes.
If we were to motion to continue this to the April meeting to give you, more than 5 days, like, Angela, do you feel comfortable that we could just, make sure to really, really check all of the boxes for materials before that meeting so that we don't, because I think, if it were all here, I think we could probably come to some sort of an agreement or a conclusion on it. But I agree with it being such an interesting potential exception and scenario that I think we'd want to make sure everything else was submitted and totally satisfactory.
And I think part of the process to keep in mind is this is our third and final continuance. The next step is approval or denial. So if we don't have everything to the letter of the guidelines, we can't approve it, it's a denial.
And that's why I would pitch the April meeting, just to make sure I don't want to draw it out for you forever, but that would give you, versus 6 days, that would give you about 36 days, and you'd be able to really communicate with staff to make sure that we weren't missing a single thing.
Is there a fence between the two houses on the?
Yes, yeah, chain link fence.
Okay. I mean, just my opinion is, I hear what Angela is saying, and what she's saying is, I think the guides say that additions are supposed to be differentiated. For this specific case, I personally don't have a problem with that straight wall being on that side of the house, opposite the driveway. It's not probably that visible from the street.
I don't either.
But I didn't know what the actual
And
visibility
it does
is.
have it does have about a 2-inch inset, so there is, a differentiation between the two. I'd even talked to her about, I could add in like a faux section. It's a lot easier for me to tear all the siding off, but then you're enlarging the footprint of it, so even though it's not adding square footage to the home, it's still adding square footage to the footprint of the property, which pushes us even farther into the red.
I'm not offended by the shape and the scope of it, the size of it, just the process. I think if this came before me right now and you had every single bit of materials, on the up and up, and the windows were up to snuff and everything like that, I would be in favor of approving it. I'm not particularly concerned about the, a giant, really obvious scenario on the west facade. Sorry, I'm just looking at it and trying to figure that out. That doesn't concern me. I just want to make sure procedurally we are able to approve this in a way that doesn't set a really bad precedent and that everybody here feels comfortable with. But if this were presented to me today and you had all of the materials, I would be inclined to approve it.
Yeah, and I think what I'm saying is, if you see this picture that's up right now, you can't even see that addition, really.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with the way it's done, because I don't think you would be able to tell that from the public right away, one way or the other.
I would like to push for March, if possible. 6 days is going to be pretty much the same to me as 36, so.
We also need to
It's
check-
your case.
Yeah. We also need to check in any citizens that wish to speak on this particular project. Okay.
I will just note, I think the suggestion of treating this like it's a new application would be really helpful. We have a lot of pieces and parts from different rounds of review, and to kind of gather all of your materials, your drawings, your windows, all of your construction products, like like it's a fresh start, would help staff and would help the commission to know that we've got what we actually need. And yes, this is actually the product that we are using today. And then just on the, as we were looking at the photo of the side of the house, you can see a pretty clear break in the roof line, which is another way of achieving differentiation. You cannot see that on the drawing. So that might be a drawing you want to look at and make it more obvious that that's a change.
Whenever I
just to-
resubmit this, if I do resubmit it as a new project, should I leave out the everything, we'll just completely disregard what was approved and just treat it as I'm submitting everything like new, and if it gets
And
denied, I've
I'm
always got
not
the
saying
original.
submit a new application. I'm just saying kind of assemble your packet as if it was a new application.
So
Like,
only assemble current
Yeah, yeah,
products and
yeah.
current plans, and, staff
make it a
will
lot less
report on the,
confusing. I
they'll
agree.
include a summary of the project, and we'll obviously have kind of the history and previous applications and stuff. But yeah, just because I think we were all feeling a little unclear about exactly which phase of this we were looking at. So I think that if all you focused on was everything that is, if you were able to finish it in the next 3 months, what exactly is going in it and on it? And we just had that, I think we'd be a few steps down the road from where we are today.
And just to really try to drive the point home with the 85 square feet, if you were coming in with an unconstructed house, proposed addition, and you were proposing to exceed by 85 square feet, why? Answer that question.
Gotcha.
Give us that reason in your packet.
And they've also asked for lot coverage in here just while we're going through it, making sure you're aware of all of the things that need to be addressed. The site coverage hasn't been calculated and presented, and often square footage does come into play on, maybe if we're going over a proposal, maybe it's relevant to the lot size.
Okay, so I think we should do a motion to approve the front deck and then a continuance on the rest, so we can at least minimize a little bit of our work in March or whenever our next meeting is. If you want to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve item 10 on HPCA 20000181.
I'll second that.
Moved by Commissioner Poore, seconded by Commissioner Remy. Please vote in PrimeGov if we can. If we cannot, we'll do a verbal. Mine not even popping up.
Yours is not? Anybody else is popping up?
No.
Y'all just want to start raising hands?
Like that.
We need to do a roll call vote again on this one.
Nothing. Oh, move. Hold on.
There we go. Moved by Poore, second by Remy. This is great. Things are happening.
No, still not. Has anybody got the vote button yet?
I think Corbin's not popping up.
So Keith or Mark, I think whoever you do not yet have a vote for, if we could just do a roll call vote for those remaining members.
Yay.
So can you, so.
Okay, that was
the-
unanimously
yes,
approved.
Unanimously approved.
Excellent. All right, do we have a motion on the second portion of this?
I will motion to continue item 9 to the March 8th meeting on HPCA 20181.
I'll second.
Moved Commissioner Poore, moved, or seconded by Commissioner Remy.
I think it's March 1st, just
March 1st.
FYI.
Yes, March 1st.
Oh, I looked at the workshop. Yep, March 1st.
Yay. Okay, that passed unanimously as well.
Now it's popping up with the
It
motion.
was moved by Commissioner Poor, second by Commissioner Remy.
Okay, it just has to be.
Perfect, thank you.
See you next month.
Yep,
I'll bring
see you
ice
next
cream next time.
Okay, we'll move on to item number HPCA 230001 at 1012 Northwest 14th Street. Is the applicant present?
This is located in Heritage Hills, Ward 6. Consideration and possible action on application by Jim Olivas, Classic Contracting, for Andrew Zillner for certificate of appropriateness to 1, remove deck, 2, construct addition, and 3, construct deck. Staff recommended approval with just conditions for all of these items, simply regarding submittal of a few additional details. We don't have a floor plan with accurate dimensions of openings, things like that, and that's something that we need so that we can compare that against a building permit. But otherwise, this met all relevant guidelines as far as size, placement, building materials, et cetera, for an addition.
So I think the question is, can you state your name and
Yeah,
address for the record?
Jim Olivas, 1228 Glenbrook Drive, Oklahoma
Perfect.
City.
Thank you. Can you get staff the information they've requested, floor plan, documentation, all of that?
Do you want the floor plan for the existing house or just the new addition?
Katie?
If we can have just the rough footprint of the house,
Yes.
but a more detailed floor plan of where you're adding on and where you're moving walls and doors
Absolutely, I
and
can
stuff.
do that, no problem.
Perfect. Any other questions from commissioners? Any citizens that wish to be heard on this particular project? Do we want to entertain a motion?
Can I move to approve
You may move to approve.
Conditions?
HPCA-23-0001, items 1, 2, and 3, with specific findings noted in the staff report, and the one condition listed. Requesting documentation can be turned into staff.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Milner, second by Commissioner Jordan. Please vote either in PrimeGov or verbally. That might have been the easiest approval I think I've ever seen in my entire time on this commission, so that's great. We appreciate, that's true, yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and just do a little knock on wood.
All right, thank you.
Yes, yay. Commissioner Corbin? Okay, that passed unanimously. Now it was the easiest approval we've seen. All right, so item number 3 on this was continued previously. We're going to move on to item number 7 under other business. We have SPUD 01466 at 419 Northwest 25th Street.
This is in Jefferson Park, Ward 2, request for a recommendation to Planning Commission on an application to rezone to a simplified planned unit development in accordance with the regulations of the R4 Medium Density Residential District, Historic Landmark, and Jefferson Park Urban Conservation District overlays. The commission has seen this previously without a great deal of discussion because the applicant was still coordinating with Planning Commission members and neighborhood representatives. We received, too late to include it in your packet, a revised master design statement that addresses, that attempts to address concerns about the proposed parking configuration by removing front yard parking and instead installing a second driveway on the other side of the house. The proposal, in summary, is to split the lot so that the front house would be a separate lot from the structure in the rear, and to convert the structure in the rear into 4 units instead of 2. Staff had recommended approval with some conditions. The structure is existing, converting it from 2 units to 4 units from a preservation perspective doesn't have an impact on the physical character of the site, although it does create concerns about the parking. Staff's recommendation was to keep it as one lot and not split the lot, and to find a more appropriate means of addressing the parking requirements rather than that would be consistent with the historic preservation guidelines. If a new driveway was to be installed, that would come back to you for a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay. Hi there. Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Fallon Magnus, 733 Northwest 22nd Street, representing the applicant. Always causing trouble, me. So just to address a couple of things that Katie said, so the existing duplex is it's 2 units and they're 2 bedrooms each and they're quite large. And we had proposed, there's 4 parking spaces in the rear of the front house. And so changing it from 2 large 2-bedroom units to 4 small studio units, it doesn't, it technically changes the density, but it doesn't change the number of bedrooms, it doesn't change the number of bathrooms and that kind of thing. And so going from 2 parking spaces per unit to 1 parking space per unit is still in line with what the city typically likes to see from as far as Planning Commission goes. We met with Janice Powers, our Ward 3 Planning Commissioner. She walked the property with us. She was very happy with the plans that we'd shown her. And we had discussions about the density, about adding 2 units. And it was her suggestion for the parking that in order to appease the Historic Preservation Commission, but also neighbors and those kind of things, removing the parking that exists in the front and putting a driveway on the west side of the front house. That does 2 things. There's currently a fence that is all the way at the front of that front house, which I know it does not meet current guidelines. So we would remove that fence, add a driveway, and we would have enough parking for 2 cars tandem on the west side of the house. That eliminates parking in the front setback, which is the current condition. And then in the rear, we still have 4 parking spaces. As for splitting the lot, the reasoning there, actually, let me go back just a little. Just another reasoning for making this 4 studio units versus 2 large 2-bedroom units is once these are fully remodeled, the price per square foot that we could rent them at would be a lot higher. And my recommendation to my client was, given the neighborhood, because this is in Paseo, we really need more 1-bedroom and studio units on the market. It is very hard to find right now. And the price per square foot that these would end up being at if they were 2-bedroom units would really price a lot of people out of the neighborhood. And so that's part of the reasoning for it. The other part of it is, occupancy. If we have 4 units and one of them's empty, then our occupancy rate is a little bit better. Insurance purposes, those sort of things. That also goes to the lot split. Our thought was that if the front house remains a part of this parcel, then it is most definitely going to be owned by someone who is just renting out property. And we felt like with the renovations that we're making to the front property or to the front house, splitting it off as a second parcel really opens it up to be an owner-occupied property, which we felt like was better for the neighborhood. So that's yeah.
So they would be the owner would be living in this space?
They could.
So this will be for resale?
So if we were to leave it as is without splitting the lot, then the likelihood of someone buying this property in total, both buildings, and then living in the front is pretty slim. That's not real typical, especially in this neighborhood. So we felt like splitting it off allowed us to sell it off individually. It's more likely to be owner-occupied. It's probably going to garner a lower price because it doesn't have a big yard. It's probably going to be a starter home for somebody. It's, in the long run, we felt better for the neighborhood, as well as just insurance purposes. It means if you are in the front house, you're completely separated, you're fenced off, you're not sharing a driveway, and then it allows this to be its own freestanding thing. It doesn't physically change the boundaries of the existing property, the existing buildings. All of the language that is in the master design statement for the SPUD is really deferential to historic preservation. It also really doesn't allow, if these both burn down, then what it allows really doesn't allow them to be rebuilt outside of their current footprint. So we were really diligent to make sure that someone can't come in after the fact, bulldoze these, or if something happens to them, that what goes back in its place would be appropriate and in kind with what exists there. This building in the rear is not historic anyway, but, you know, we still wanted to make sure that we weren't opening up the property to eventual redevelopment that doesn't fit within historic preservation guidelines.
Okay, and can you just walk me through, I'm looking at Exhibit C in your packet, and I'm trying to reconcile it with what we received today before the meeting, that I believe is your most current proposal that kind of just barely missed that window of making it into the online packet.
Okay.
So, and this is probably a really simple question I'm just missing here. So you're talking about proposing a new driveway on the, let's see, what would that be?
On the
what
west
direction? On
side.
the west side. So would you be keeping each driveway?
Yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
the existing driveway, so that center line to center line, they would be 40 feet apart.
But
I
this
think
would
the dimension shows them edge to edge, but center to center, they're 40 feet.
For me, that's kind of the main issue I have with it, is just, we have, you know, and I understand the lot split would make it a little bit different, but we have turned down people who've wanted 2 aprons on one property, and that feels in conflict with some of the things we normally really ask of historic structures and neighborhoods.
So if I may, the special case here, the special circumstance for this would be that the existing parking is in the front setback. It's not ideal, it's not attractive. This allows us, putting another apron in, to me is a better alternative, because what we're now proposing is getting that parking out from in front of the property, it's within the front setback, and we're pushing the cars back behind the setback, which puts them behind the front of the house. So if you're driving down the street, you're not just seeing 2 cars sitting 3 feet from the front porch. That's, I know it's not ideal, but it's a better alternative than what is currently existing.
I tend to agree with that. I looked at it and was thinking we're going to put a driveway in with the driveway and the parking spots in the front, and it just felt like the whole thing was going to be concreted in. Do we know, and you may have already asked this, but I was looking through some notes, but what is going to be the lot coverage with all this new concrete added and taken away and all of that? How does that kind of calculate and shake out? You knew we were
sorry.
going to ask that, didn't you?
I think the lot coverage currently is probably like 80% in the
Yeah.
current condition.
It's really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe-
So
maybe-
that-
I don't know that you're improving, or you're,
I don't know that it's much different.
I was hoping it could be an improvement by the one driveway versus the two. maybe
yeah,
not.
I think that the property is currently not in compliance with that coverage rule of thumb that we use.
That's probably true.
So this is our staff report from previous reviews, so I haven't looked to see if this has changed in the current MDS, but proposed maximum lot coverage in the SPUD is 50%. And I don't know if, with everything that's there now, if they would be meeting that, but the required lot coverage in the new zoning would be 50%. Current
So-
zoning has no maximum lot coverage, but requires 40% common open space.
So I messed up in my calculation. I did not count the driveways. I counted physical buildings. That was, so the 50% is incorrect if we're counting concrete. I'll have to recalculate that.
So Fallon, you said Exhibit C is what shows the proposed new driveway?
I would have to see what you're looking at.
The proposed new driveway is at your seat,
Oh, okay.
not in the computer.
Okay.
Oh, here you go.
But I don't want to, it's been a while since I've been about.
So Fallon, so with removing the parking that's currently in the front, does that just become yard,
Yes.
green space?
Yeah, with a
Okay.
sidewalk going
Okay.
out to the street.
Certainly a much better look, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
I buy the special circumstance. I do think it's an aesthetic improvement that is,
Necessary?
while multiple curb cuts on one property is not common, I think that is preferred to a parking lot in the front yard. So I buy that. I think 2 things, Fallon, that I would look at when you come back for the CA, so this doesn't have any bearing on the SPUD
This is just the
recommendation.
SPUD recommendation. Yeah.
Is taking a look, the site plan is isolated to your proposed property. But there is a driveway adjacent on the west side. So that curb cut ends up being like a double up, and it affects the neighbor's property as well. So that's something to take a look at. And then the other thing I would recommend looking at, because we've had a lot of cases where, or not a lot, but some cases where a driveway sheds a disproportionate amount of water onto an adjacent property and those kinds of things. Just be aware of those issues and make sure that we kind of get ahead of them to make sure the design is not creating a burden on the adjacent properties.
I don't recall if I've already asked, but are there any citizens that wish to speak on this particular project? None. Perfect. Let's see.
So do we need to continue this to revise the language of the SPUD, or are we just recommending, can Fallon change the SPUD verbiage when it goes to the Board of Adjustments?
So this will go to Planning Commission, and it is anticipated to go February 9th. So if you all are comfortable and everyone's on the same page about what language needs to be revised, you can recommend approval with the condition that those revisions be made and list out those revisions.
Okay, so are we clear on what the revisions are for the lot coverage? Because it sounds like there's a conflict between built structure versus pervious coverage.
So this is something that comes up a lot with SPUDs. Sometimes applicants will list building coverage instead of lot coverage. When I read the definition of lot coverage, that's anything that's permanently affixed to the ground, which includes things like driveways and paving. So I think that however you all want to define that, if you are concerned about how much paving there is on the site and how much open space there needs to be on the site, that's something to specify in a recommendation.
I don't know that that would be my concern with this particular project.
No, but I think my caution there is if the wording in the SPUD requires a 50% lot coverage, and then you come back later, then you're not in compliance with your own SPUD.
Yeah,
Which I don't personally have an issue with the lot coverage currently, as long as you're not increasing what is currently there, and that you're not creating an undue burden on the neighbors, then I don't have a problem with it.
So it could be a condition that the lot coverage be revised to reflect the lot coverage as depicted in the proposed site plan as submitted by the applicant for this meeting.
I like that. I can support that. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Just gonna add one more comment.
Okay.
On the new drive that's proposed on the west, it's kind of hard because it doesn't have an actual like full dimension, but I'm trying to figure out if you stack 2 cars, it still looks like you have a lot of room.
So the dimension that says 36 feet, so 2 standard parking spaces would be 18 feet apiece. So that's why we chose 36 feet.
So does it really need to go that far back though, is my question. Obviously,
It
I don't want
doesn't
anybody
necessarily-
viewing where the sidewalk is, but I would think that you wouldn't need quite that length of,
So the goal there was to have 2 cars,
right?
which is what is currently available in the front. But we wanted it to be behind the setback, the property setback. We don't want it to be, I mean, people are going to park in their driveway, it's what they're going to do. But as far as the official documentation, we wanted to show that we were attempting to get it out of the setback.
I fear you're just gonna end up with 3 cars parked there.
Probably.
You're now
So
providing that length that will easily allow for that.
Yeah.
I'm willing to revise it down to 18.
I appreciate the attempt, but I think what it's gonna do is still just allow for 3 cars to stack instead of
Okay.
2.
That's a really good point. My concern with these is always the chaos that some of the density creates with parking. Just because there are tons of multifamilies in all of these neighborhoods, but not everybody drove 2 or 3 cars apiece when they were built, and not everybody had teenagers or whatever. So I think that's a really valid point to just maybe not create an opportunity for there to be several stacked cars, and I don't know. It feels like a lot on one space to me, but I also recognize that it's allowed and seems to be favorable.
Yeah, that's a lot there right now.
Right.
Yeah, that's the other part of the SPUD.
It's
Yeah,
Exhibit B, I
and-
think.
And I guess my comment on that is whether it's 2 cars or 3 cars, you're gonna have the density you're gonna have, they're gonna park on the street. So it's off-street parking or on-street parking. To me, the question ends up being what kind of gives me that gut check is what's it doing to 421, the adjacent property then next door?
To the east or west? To the
The
west.
So what is its impact on that property is kind of that guide. And whether it's 36 feet or 18 feet, I don't personally really have a strong opinion. It would be looking at it in the context of what does it do to the neighbor? And trying to be a good neighbor on providing the best solution for the neighborhood.
Okay. Are we at a point where we can make a recommendation, either for approval or otherwise? Who wants to make that recommendation? Commissioner Remy?
Looking at that.
Sounds like Commissioner Porval told you to do that.
I'm trying to get my head around all the considerations that need to be tracked in addition to the staff report.
So Commissioner, one of the conditions in the staff report is lot size, width, setbacks, coverage, and open spaces be modified to be consistent with the existing development. Does that give you the ability to just say with the conditions noted in the staff report?
So do we want to specify the lot coverage be corrected?
Probably.
I think that's fair. I mean,
Katie?
I think that covers it because it says coverage be revised.
So that condition includes lot size and setbacks, which are being modified to allow the lot split. Because right now, you couldn't split the lot because you wouldn't have the minimum lot width per the base zoning. So if you wanted to use that, if you want to support the lot split, and if you want to use that condition, I think you would have to limit it to the coverage and open space requirements be modified to be consistent with the existing development and the proposed site plan. Or just with the site plan as presented by the applicant.
So really, if you just take that as it's written, but tack on behind with its retention as a single property, would you say and proposed lot split? And or proposed lot
Say
split?
or.
Take out lot size with setbacks. Because you were recommending maybe not do the split.
Right.
So we're saying we're allowing the split. Is that right? Everybody's comfortable with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll try. Am I making, what is it, a recommendation to Planning Commission?
Yes.
I'll make a recommendation to Planning Commission for SPUD 01466 with the conditions that the open space requirements and coverage match the existing conditions or the proposed site improvements as before us today. Does that work?
Recommendation of approval.
Yes.
Did you want
And
to
the-
include any of the findings?
Yes. I don't have, yeah, with all of the findings. And the recommendation, and the condition that the parking up front be modified to eliminate those parking spaces.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Poor, second by Commissioner Remy. Please
I
vote in
think-
prime gov. Or
Maybe.
verbally.
Or no. Yes.
Is that Milner?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yay.
Yes. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was passed unanimously. Thank you.
In case anybody was confused.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to BOA 15218 at 827 Northwest 17th Street. Is the applicant present?
This is located in Mestet Park, Ward 6. Request for a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment regarding an application for a special exception to allow home sharing. You all do have a number of letters from residents regarding this proposal, and I believe all of those have been sent to the applicant as well. So you've received those comments. The one thing I wanted to note for the commission and for the applicant and for anyone in attendance for this item is that the commission's purview is really the impact of home sharing upon the historic character, the historic fabric of the district. That's what they are going to base their recommendation upon. And ultimately, the Board of Adjustment is the deciding body that determines whether or not a special exception for home sharing is appropriate in this location under a wide range of criteria that they are charged with evaluating. So if you have concerns about this application and you want those to be heard, I would encourage you to attend the Board of Adjustment hearing as well, because this body is only making one recommendation that will be forwarded on to Board of Adjustment. And that meeting is tomorrow in this same room at 1:30.
Okay, perfect. So staff has recommended a denial. We have a ton of opposition to this. Talk to us about the Airbnb that you're wanting to put in and kind of what the response is to the opposition and all of that.
Good afternoon, Commission, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. My name is Taylor Volk at 827 Northwest 17th Street. I have been a resident of Oklahoma for 12 years. I joined the military and brought me here to tinker. I went to the University of Oklahoma and I've made Oklahoma my home. I've always dreamed of owning property in the historic districts. Mestet Park and Heritage Hills were the top goal of mine. I've made that a goal for a very long time. So I admire the historic preservation of the area, and I intend to uphold that the historic look wholeheartedly. There are a number of concerns from neighbors that was brought to my attention only a few days ago. I have a couple things I wanted to ask. The reason I'm here. For one thing, I would like to respectfully request an extension on this so I can address the concerns with the neighbors. That's a big priority. So that will be, I wanted to address that with you, let you know that that is a goal that I'm going to be going forward. And I would also like to ask for if you have any recommendations for the property or recommendations for the home sharing application in general, or any insight on this and what I can do going forward and make the best decisions under your direction. I hired a professional property management company to uphold the upkeep and maintain the integrity of the historic preservation. She's here with me today, behind me. And if you have any questions for her in particular, she's also here to take any insight you may have, and that's a goal here. So if you could accept an extension, and I will be able to address any concerns and take notes on recommendations from you today.
Perfect, thank you. Are we able to continue these types of requests?
What could happen? What could happen is that this body wouldn't have a recommendation for the Board of Adjustment to hear tomorrow. So if this body continued its recommendation and the Board of Adjustment did not, then you'd be in the position of this board not having a voice at that meeting unless they all came. And then it wouldn't be the voice of this body, it would be individual comments.
So it's almost like he needs a continuance from the Board of Adjustments, not a continuance from Historic Preservation.
I feel pretty opposed to not having the conversation today, given how many people have shown up
Sure.
to give their time.
I will say that I think that, typically if you need, on an item that we are just providing a recommendation on, unless there's something that you're like the spud that we just heard, that was on our agenda several times, and we continued that, and now it'll go on to Planning Commission, but that's because they were making changes to the spud and didn't have a final product for us to see. I think in this case, the body that you really need a continuance from is Board of Adjustment. I think it makes sense to have the conversation here, get input from the commission and from the public, and then Board of Adjustment, when an applicant requests a continuance, I think they generally grant that. They aren't going to second guess you on whether or not you need a continuance. So.
And I think I read that opposition's representation also was requesting a continuance. I don't know if that made its way up to the
So
zoning.
someone from the office that is representing the neighborhood is present.
Yes, yes, please.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Caitlin Turner, 522 Colcord Drive, here as counsel to various property owners, some of which are here with us. We had previously requested a continuance so that this would all be deferred, as well as the Board of Adjustment. We didn't hear back from the applicant, so that's why we're here today. And although we definitely appreciate his willingness to meet, I don't see what can change permitting-wise and other in the next couple weeks. We would request that this go ahead and be heard today.
Perfect. Okay. What questions do we have to start out with?
So is this an HP or HL?
This is HP. This
So
is Master
they're supposed to live on site.
So in HP, it is required to be the host's primary residence, and they're required to be on site at the time of rental.
Is this your primary residence?
Yes,
Will you be on site at the time of rentals?
yes.
Okay.
Have you been, I'm reading through these comments, and there are a lot of them, and the one that is, in general, I don't love a home share right there, particularly with this many people. But one thing that I'm reading over and over in here is statements that state that you've been operating without a home share permit since at least October. To me, that's, kind of goes back to some of our earlier concerns that we just simply can't allow people to skirt the rules, get turned in, come have these conversations. There are city ordinances and rules and guidelines for a reason. And to me, that's one of the most concerning things about it, is that for months, this has been an ongoing issue that hasn't been permitted.
I think, maybe along the same lines too, I believe that there's some construction on the property that is also not permitted as well.
Correct. It just feels like and I apologize, there's a lot to digest here in these comments and this case. But yeah, it feels like everything that's going on the property feels haphazard and unplanned and incomplete. The permitting, the construction, the concerns, the lack of planning for this many people, I'm failing to understand how this is a good idea.
Well,
Failing to
can
figure out a
you,
way.
how long have you had the property?
Since May of last year.
Okay, and so the garage in the back that was demolished and the new structure that's being built, were you unaware of the requirements to get a city building permit or to get a CA, or help me explain on wanting to build apartments in the back for additional living space for the rental?
Yes, so there would be I think that'd be a multifaceted answer. One would be simply ignorance, new to historic guidelines. I've learned a lot, and I made a lot of mistakes. And I'm standing here in front of you to try to fix all of those mistakes. And that one is a big mistake that I will be coming back to the board with architectural designs and getting approval. So that's to come, and I own that mistake. So I'd like to make that right, and I'd like to make that right in my neighborhood and with the Historic Preservation Commission. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So do you live in the home and you rent out rooms within the home? You do not live, like your primary residence is in the primary structure?
The front
Yes,
part of
yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes,
So you're renting separate rooms within the home?
that would be correct.
So the struggle that I have, there appear to be many continuing and ongoing challenges with this particular property. And I'm certainly not speaking for any of my fellow commissioners, but it feels inappropriate to exacerbate this problem, make it, make it even larger and bigger by allowing a home sharing application to go on in its current state. Now, that doesn't mean that if all of these problems were, the construction and some of these other challenges, if that were fixed at a later date, I could certainly see an application where we would take it and take a look at it and review it, but with everything that appears to, with all of the challenges that appear to be there currently, I don't know that I can recommend an approval in good faith based off the concerns from the neighborhood, the construction challenges, and some of the other things that we've uncovered today. I don't know that I could support a recommendation of an approval for the Board of Adjustments in this one.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you wanting to come back, and you made mistakes, didn't get approvals for those things, so I appreciate you wanting to slow down and go look at how can you solve those issues, but I have a concern with you moving forward with the approval for home sharing when in reality you need to step back from the whole thing and say, let's take this in appropriate steps. So that's my concern with that. Can't really piecemeal it together that way, so.
Yeah.
The garage is the garage to include an apartment within it?
There's no garage.
The
Back building.
the back building, the accessory structure. This is just going to be more living space?
The building
Correct.
in the back, I would like to, with the architectural designs and your recommendation, I would really like to add a garage. I do not know if that would be acceptable considering the size of the lot. Those are questions I had asked previously, and I don't know if that would be acceptable or not. It seemed like it may be unlikely due to the size. But the first floor I would like to make as a garage or shop or storage. The second floor, the main goal would be additional living space.
And would that mean additional renters and going up from 12 people able to rent at a time to 14 or 16?
It could be my residence, if that would be acceptable to rent.
But would it still
the main.
increase the amount of potential renters on Airbnb? It's got it currently listed at 12. So if you're living in the primary structure right now with those 12, if you move out there, are you updating this to reflect that even more people will be allowed to rent the home?
My main goal will be to rent the main structure of the house, just one short-term rental for the main structure of the house. If I were to live in the back unit, if I were to live in the back unit, I would rent out the main structure of the house.
Right, but would you
as one.
update the listing to reflect that it would be for even more than 12 people once you move out of it?
No, it'd be still the same number.
So I have a question for staff, and I need to re-familiarize myself with the regulation, but just for context for you, the home sharing has been an issue for a lot of cities, and there was a lot of effort taken on the front end for home sharing as it relates to historic preservation districts. And so a lot of these conversations and regulations, such as the requirement to live on premise as your primary residence, all came out of a result of those conversations, which was a public process. And so I would encourage you to review that. Is there a restriction on density with home sharing as part of that effort? I'm not familiar.
So there's not a a restriction on like the number of guests you can advertise for on home sharing per se, although Board of Adjustment will often include that as a condition of their approval as part of the special exception. There's not a cap on that in the home sharing ordinance. What there is a cap on is the number of dwelling units you can have at a property. So HP allows 1 dwelling unit per house. So you would not be able to build a garage apartment here because the house is already your primary dwelling. You would not be able to split the house up into multiple units with self-sufficient kitchen, et cetera, because you can only have the 1 dwelling unit. So that would be one concern about building an additional structure with the intent of that becoming the host's living quarters.
Is there language about how many different individuals can rent different rooms? You know, like, can you list this 4 separate times on Airbnb and be renting out rooms versus the entire structure?
You can do that, and when the application comes before the Board of Adjustment, those are questions that are asked. They want to know how many people will be in this residence, how often will you be renting it, how long will the guests be allowed to stay, and the earlier question you had was about whether there was a limit on the number that could be in a particular neighborhood. While there is not specifically that, the board does look at the concentration of Airbnb and similar offerings in a neighborhood. There has been before a map, kind of a dot map that shows concentrations in various areas. So it is looked at. It is something that they consider.
And what is the regulation on cars? I mean, is it just however many people you have, there's no restriction on the number of cars, is there?
So I don't believe there's anything in the actual home sharing ordinance about parking. The Board of Adjustment does also include that as a condition of their approval often, that that a host has to advertise that these are the requirements for parking. I mean, parking on the street is allowed, and we don't have any control of that, but they don't want people advertising that, oh, you can have a certain number of cars that would become
Because I think the cars is the size of a house for 12 people. I mean, cars is going to be an issue. We had another home sharing application in a different neighborhood, and that's always my concern. But in that instance, all the neighbors wrote to us saying they were fine with it because there was only 2 places. And so I think in that situation, you have to look at what the impact it's going to be on the neighborhood, and I think 12 is a lot of people.
And that is a concern. The Board of Adjustment has looked at the number of parking spaces that are available on the site. And very often, property owners will say that it is their rule that you may only park on the street. But the board itself, Katie is correct, they have not said you may not park on the street, but they have encouraged the applicant to require that their guests park on site.
And I think I didn't ask my question very well, but within the ordinance, I think what I'm trying to figure out is there specific language preventing you from renting within one home to multiple individuals who have, no relationship to
Like a
one
hostel.
another whatsoever? Yes, you're just renting.
Coming at different times.
Is because that's what all of these letters are stating, is that it appears that, no one really knows each other, that's just people coming and going, and it doesn't seem like it's one family at a time renting the structure, and I'm just curious if the ordinance specifically comments on that.
There are criteria that describe what your view is actually, the things that are considered when you decide whether or not to recommend an Airbnb, and I do not have that list before me, but it does specify certain things, including how it impacts the character of the neighborhood and things like that. Do you happen to have it in your report? I do
I
not.
just have it pulled up in here.
Oh, good.
I will find the language here, but as far as, I know that the ordinance does say you can rent a whole home or rooms, individual rooms within a home. That's not the typical model that we see on, if you've ever used home sharing or, Airbnb or VRBO, usually you're renting an entire house, but it does allow for someone to rent out, for instance, one bedroom in their house. And from my recollection of it, there's not a limit on that. If you had a 5-bedroom house, you could rent out
Okay.
multiple bedrooms to multiple people.
I just, for me, there are way too many issues at play here, way too many people who are opposed to it for very valid reasons. And ultimately, even if we were not having a concern with, somebody operating without a permit or constructing a building without a permit or approval, it still, to me, feels disrespectful to the neighbors and the neighborhood to be operating the way it is being operated. 12 cars on the street, lots of noise. It feels really out of balance with a neighborhood in general, not just this neighborhood, with a neighborhood.
It feels like it's negatively impacting
Yes.
and affecting the character of the neighborhood. I think,
In
my
the
opinion.
extreme. I mean, there's more letters here than we have time to read.
Okay, so my recommendation would be a denial. I don't know how the other commissioners feel about it at this point. I know there's a lot of concerned citizens in here that may or may not want to speak. Do we wish to be heard today? Ma'am, council?
Caitlin Turner, 522 Colcord Drive again. Just to kind of reiterate and touch on Commissioner Jordan and Chairman Fudge's points that were made. This commission protects a district that requires extra care, and City Council implements and encourages that protection through passing these ordinances, such as requiring the approval of a CA before demolition, before construction, and also adding that element that you don't see in any other district with a home sharing application, which is to require the property owner or the host be living and have that property be his primary residence. So none of that we're really seeing as being in compliance with here. From the staff report, it appears that there was an illegal demolition, illegal and ongoing construction, which causes a life safety issue due to the lack of inspection and by licensed contractors and city professionals. Again, also as well, the applicant is a property owner. It appears he owns about 7 other rental properties, and we would argue that this is another rental investment property that wouldn't be his primary residence. Hasn't been living on site, and it's already been advertised on Airbnb. So for that reason, and if it is another investment property, that's fine too, just not a short-term rental in an HP district. These aren't cosmetic issues. Again, these are pretty serious permitting and code issues that have been violated and have not been compliant with. And for this license to be granted to accommodate 12 people, it's just such a hazard with the conditions that are on the property now. This is the first time, I believe, that a special exception application for home sharing has been presented to you with a recommendation for denial. So we kind of agree with you, Chairman Fudge, that this should be recommended for denial, and also that the specific findings for denial be adopted so that the Board of Adjustment can see the unique nature of this application.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir? Well, let's have, whoever wants to come first.
Mr. Volk, if you want to sit down while we hear from residents, and then if you have any final comments to make when that's finished, we'll let you speak again.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you please state your name and address for the record, too?
I'm sorry?
Address for the record, please.
My name is Andy Sullivan. I live at 915 Northwest 17th Street, so a house away from this one. My wife and I'm going to read this for briefness. My wife and I, Sue, and our 2 sons moved into a dilapidated house at 915 Northwest 17th Street in 1976, prior to a neighborhood association or HP designation. I was advised by my employer when we moved here that that would not be a good idea, as it was a bad neighborhood and that our kids would have to go to private schools. That was also prior to the 1000 block being closed off to a cul-de-sac to control traffic going through our block. If this is allowed to go through, you'll be allowing the utilization of a home in a historic neighborhood as a 3-story, multiple occupant hotel with 2 apartments behind it and no parking lot or sufficient street spaces. We've already experienced that over the holiday season. There will be no control over who stays there. It sets a dangerous precedent, allowing anyone else to do the same. In 1976, 4 houses in our block were still multifamily with as many as 5 living in one unit. One was a boarding house, and the owner was murdered the first year that we were here. The last thing, the house that in question, I think, was the last house in our neighborhood to be grandfathered in. In World War II, you could have home sharing, and that was allowed in our neighborhood, but as those homes sold off, that passed on. So we could end up with a neighborhood of small hotels, and so I'm opposed to this and hope that you will continue your opposition to it as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And sir, as a reminder, name and address for the record, too, please.
Steve Mathis, 819 Northwest 16th Street. I can see this house from my bedroom. I walk past this, whatever it is, every day with my dogs. It's not a garage, it's an apartment. But my concern with this is I grew up on a farm in Arkansas, and my granddad used to say, if somebody shows you what they are, believe it. Well, we've got illegal construction. He tore down something without permission. It's got multiple, the 3rd floor of this room, this hasn't really come up. I've been in this house. The 3rd floor is a self-contained apartment, I believe, unless it's been changed really recently. So this, as Andy said, is really an attempt to put a small hotel like the Bradford House up on Classen in our neighborhood. And I hope that your denial to the Board of Adjustment is really vehement, because this would be a case of a really slippery slope. There are other big houses in Mesta Park and Heritage Hills, and the pressure for people to make money off these houses by splitting them up and doing this is immense, because it's a great neighborhood. Why is it a great neighborhood? Because we care about it. So I really hope your denial is vehement and specific as to why you think he should not be allowed to open a hotel in Mesta Park. Thank you.
And just to echo that, I agree. I've lived in Mesta Park for 10 years, and I agree that the strong language really needs to reflect what a giant, giant problem this could be in a neighborhood that has 10,000 square foot homes and, easily could be divided up into 30 bedrooms. To me, this is the most concerning home share proposal we've seen, because it does, we can make a lot of arguments, and I know that I'm generally the one to make them when it comes to home sharing and Airbnb. We can make a lot of arguments about how it does negatively impact your neighbors. I love Airbnbs in general, but a lot of the proposals we see, I can easily come up with a lot of reasons not to do it. So to me, I can't come up with one reason to do this, and this is the most, impactful and dangerous precedent to set. So I just would ask also that we include some pretty strong language in our denial.
Does that mean you're going to?
Oh, I thought you were going to do it, but.
Well, before we get to a motion, I want to just make an observation from all the letters that I read. So what I'm hearing is, and I think the intent is that there's a correlation between whether or not it's home sharing, rental, ownership. There needs to be a correlation of the use of the property with the base zoning. So there's a disconnect there that's currently happening that I think is causing a lot of tension and concern. But I do want to speak out that a lot of the letters, and maybe because of the context it read this way, but there was a lot of anti-home sharing across the board. Mm-hmm. And I want to just make sure this commission's aware that, yes, in this particular case, I will also support a denial for specific reasons relative to this property, such as the disconnection between use and intent. But I don't agree with sort of some fear-mongering of home sharing will be the demise of all of our neighborhoods.
Agreed.
And sir, you were so eloquent in how you said it, and what you said was perfect, but there were a lot of letters in there that were much more wide sweeping, generic against home sharing. And I just want to make that point and that distinction between there is an appropriate use and an inappropriate use of home sharing.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And Right, and
You gentlemen that spoke today did not give me that impression. It's a lot of the other letters.
Yeah, and I think though it's because of scenarios like this that people view home sharing within neighborhoods like this.
and so that's part of why I think it's important to identify why we feel so strongly about this case.
Sure, and there's a element of emotion in this case that I think comes out in the letters as well. So but just from an objective standpoint, I just wanted to make that distinction. I'm not saying that this specific case is that those comments are out of hand. I just want to make that distinction.
Did we have anyone else from the public that wanted to speak? Or was that?
Mr. Volk, anything else you want to add? I'm sorry, did you all want to speak too?
Julie Johnson, 901 Northwest 17th. I live right next, well, Francis separates my home from this one. And I, too, agree with your point about home sharing in general. There is a home at 16th and Francis that is a home sharing property, and I have no problem with that. It's not renting out for, $120 a night for 10 people. I have kids at my house. There's a lot of traffic coming and going from this house. I do not feel comfortable with my kids playing in the front yard because there's just so much going on, and I don't know who's being vetted to live in this home. If it is a home sharing property, it's so easy for you to go online and say, I want to rent it for the night, and God only knows what's happening over there. So it's a very emotional thing for me, for sure. And I have had to look at this property in all of its different stages over the last 8 months. And, we live in historic preservation for the preservation of the neighborhood. And so that's why this one is a concern. It is the volume of people. It is the, just the utter lack of respect for the city and its ordinances, honestly. Once I saw the garage raised and everything, I thought, I never got a letter to come to a meeting. I never got any kind of notification. So, and once I contacted the HP Commission, and I found out that, there were no building permits whatsoever. Of course, I'm the daughter of a home builder and land developer, and I've gone through the permit process myself. And so the lack of regard is very concerning, because if you don't even know that in modern times you need a building permit, that's like homeownership 101. So I'm just concerned that everything else that goes on is not going through any processes. And so those are my concerns. Thank you.
Oh, yes, sir. I got one more person.
I'm Andrew Griffin, live at 830 Northwest 17th Street, directly across the street from 827. And I have met Mrs. Volk here. I've not met her son, Taylor. I waved at him once and I didn't get his attention, but I was never told what was going on at the house. I knew it had been on the market for a while. There had been some interested families to move into it, and we were excited about that, but then it was radio silence. Nothing was being told to us about what was going across the street from us. We have 3 young children. They couldn't go walk down the sidewalk because there was all this construction debris blocking the sidewalk. There was something that had been spilled in the gutter. It was concerning to us, but I understand. My father was director of city planning for Little Rock, Arkansas in the 70s and 80s, and I spent a lot of time in historic districts. My wife and I chose to live in one, and there are certain, things you have to follow to live there. And I didn't feel Mr. Volk had come and introduced himself or told us what was going on, and we're right across the street. So I'm glad this issue is being brought up, and I know there's been mistakes. He said he was ignorant of some of these issues, and perhaps they can be addressed. I don't know, but I'm glad it's being addressed, and clearly from Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Mathis and others, there's a neighborhood concern, but I think there can be a solution found going forward.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Mr. Volk?
I'd like to take a moment to thank all the neighbors for giving the insight so that I'm able to address these issues head on. And thanks for having this meeting today. This is very insightful. It sounds like there's a possibility that this could be something we could pursue in the future. I've written down the notes, and I think that every single one of these issues that we have discussed from the neighbors, I believe we can come up with something that would be very easily obtainable. But I hope that I can take the time with the neighbors, get to know my neighborhood better, and through some recommendations that you had mentioned in the conversations amongst yourselves, the idea of having 12 people, my goal was to host families, mostly just host families that could get together for holidays and get together for big events is something that I was looking for at this particular property. I know that the idea of renting out every single one of the rooms individually might be a big concern. If I were to go towards the direction of hosting families, would that be more appropriate versus hotel and ideas that I want to say, can we, in the future meetings, is that something that, like, rules of establishing this short-term rental that I would understand as rules and be able to make that as a rule and actually follow those rules in correlation to the home sharing? That was a question I had for you.
I think my hope is that you would work with your neighbors and figure out a solution that they're comfortable with and that you're comfortable with, and that works for everyone. I don't know what that looks like or how that conversation goes, but I personally think that's a conversation between you and the neighborhood association.
I agree. I think that there are certain, home sharing applications that come before us that we don't have any reason to deny, because the HP neighborhoods have worked with the city to create an appropriate compromise and ordinance regarding home sharing in historic neighborhoods. And, an owner-occupied single-family home that's renting out and checks all the boxes on the ordinances and doesn't have complaints from the neighbor and has proper permitting, I think it would be hard for this commission to, recommend a denial to Board of Adjustment. So I think that, yeah, it's an important conversation to have with your neighbors and to get on track with city permitting and HP permitting or HP applications.
Any other comments? Okay.
I did have one more question,
yes, sir.
if I may. Also the question of parking. I know neighbors are concerned about parking. That previous picture, there's currently one parking spot in the back, and my future goals for future planning, I would like to ask if I could extend the driveway so I can allow 3 cars in that drive. That's a good picture. Where that truck is. If I would have all the plans written so that we can enter the alleyway from the left into the right, and there'd be enough spaces for 2, maybe 3. If that would help with this determination. Also, the idea of a garage for that structure, that's another meeting I'll be having with you. Could that, based on the picture you see here, is this something that may be acceptable to have a garage right in front of that driveway, or would that be something that would be not?
I think without seeing the complete plans and having an application in front of us, it's really hard for us to make any sort of recommendation, determination, or tell you, yeah, we think that's a good thing or a bad thing. If you want to do it, submit the application, and then we'll walk it through the normal process that it typically goes through.
Understood.
I would definitely encourage meeting with staff, Angela and Katie.
Yes.
I mean, you don't have to have an application to have that conversation. You can just have a dialogue and schedule time to meet with them.
The driveway having more parking spaces, would that be more in line with our recommendations?
I think certainly if there's more parking spaces on the property, that's helpful, but I don't know that, I can't tell you what the configuration would look like, if it's even doable, but I think practically speaking, hypothetically, yes, a driveway with more parking spaces is better.
I think, again.
We don't know if that can even be done.
Meet with staff and
Yeah.
talk with them, because, there's a lot more at play than just consideration of adding parking for the home sharing, because, we look at lot coverage, we look at, and, we've got a whole guideline that we have to, of standards that we have to follow. So I think it's more than just the one particular association with the home share that we would have to analyze for additional parking.
And I'll just say, so I live next door to home sharing. And my neighbor came to all of us that were immediately adjacent to the property, and he said, hey, here are the rules that I'm putting in my advertisement. How do you guys feel about this? What additional rules would you like me to input in there? He followed all the processes. He got a CA. He's done everything on the up and up, and there's no issues. And we feel great about it. And the property is home sharing, and it's great. It doesn't negatively affect the neighborhood at all. What I'm hearing today, and I hope that your claims are genuine about wanting to remedy some of the missteps, but I would start with your neighbors and what is going to make them comfortable with making this a home sharing property. If that's your end goal, it may be something that's a lot less revenue than you're comfortable with. But a lot of these questions on what are we comfortable with, I think right now, as the current state is, it's creating a nuisance and it's negatively impacting the neighborhood. And until that is coordinated and remedied, and all your neighbors come here and say, yes, we're comfortable with this, I think it's going to be a hard sell.
Okay. Do we have a recommendation? Would somebody like to make this recommendation?
Is a recommendation, is it I've never actually done one. Is it a statement or just a recommendation for denial? Do we outline specific findings or recommendations in another form, or just in a statement?
It's similar to what you do with what you see that Katie and Angela had in their report, but this time you're making a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. So you're saying as a body what your recommendation is and why you have that recommendation. And you list a few factors that might be important to you for the board to consider. And you vote on that, and that's your recommendation that gets forwarded. Typically, Katie is present. You'll be there
Yep.
tomorrow.
Yep.
And so she'll be able to elaborate on the recommendation that you make.
Okay.
So we have, in the staff report, we have a recommendation drafted with comments and listed 3 comments related to this application, and you could certainly add to that if you felt like that was helpful.
Okay. So I would recommend to the Board of Adjustment that BOA 15218, or sorry, there's 2 different.
15218.
But then
Sorry,
it
that's a
says
typo. It is
15170.
It is 15218. Sorry about that.
15218, I would recommend a denial of this to the Board of Adjustment on a request for a special exception in the Historic Preservation District regarding home sharing at this address. With the findings would these be considered findings or recommendations in the staff report? And with the further notation that the lack of permitting on the project and the lack of appropriate CAs and the project that is currently underway, the construction currently underway on the property, is of particular concern regarding future occupancy increases with the home share application, and only creating, how to word this only amplifying the problems that have been noted in today's commission hearing.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Jordan, second by Commissioner Gaines. Please vote either in PrimeGov or verbally if need be.
You're voting in, well, I don't
In
know,
support
but.
of- You're voting in support of the recommended denial.
Right, if you want to recommend denial, you vote yes, which is kind of confusing.
I vote yes. Commissioner Poor?
Yes.
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 Yay.
Yes.
Commissioner Corbin? Oh, excellent. Okay, there we go. All right, that recommendation for denial was passed unanimously.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your
Yep.
opinions and recommendations.
Perfect.
And Katie, what time is Board of Adjustment?
Board of Adjustment at 1:30.
Okay.
And it's online. What?
Might not have anybody left after this one. Okay, we'll talk about item number C, BOA 15244 at 704 Northwest 27th Street in Paseo Ward 2.
This is a request for recommendation to the Board of Adjustment on an application for home sharing. This is one that is located in an HL district, which, as we've discussed before, does not require the host to be for it to be their primary residence, and they're not required to be on site. Staff recommended approval for this one. There's no indication that the proposed home sharing would be in conflict with the historic character of the property or would have an adverse effect on the district.
The applicant present? Negative. Staff recommends approval. Looks like this complies with all of the guidelines. I would be in favor of approval on this one.
I'll make a motion. Approval. Well, as soon as I can find it. Okay, I move recommendation of approval for BOA 15244 based on the findings of facts of staff.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Gaines, seconded by Commissioner, what is your last, Jordan? So, lost it for a second there.
Commissioner Smith?
Commissioner Gordon, I almost called you Commissioner Gordon, but it's Commissioner Jordan. Let's all vote. However you see fit. Or do we all just want to go verbal? Let's go verbal.
Aye.
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 Yay.
Yay.
Okay, that item passed unanimously as well. Okay, let's see, we are going to move on to, I think, communication and reports. We had 8 items. Want to do anything with those, Katie?
No action required. As always, let us know if you ever have questions about anything you see on those administrative approvals.
We had one withdrawal. Anything we need to note there?
No, that is related to the project we had a CA and also an SPUD for this property, the SPUD that you heard just today. There was discussion the last time about whether or not they were going to relocate a historic window on the house, and they withdrew the item to relocate that window. So they're going to leave that one as is.
Okay. Let's see, any administrative closings? 3 of them. Anything we need to do with those?
Nope.
Anything from City Council?
Nothing from City Council, Board of Adjustment, Planning Commission.
Or municipal counselor.
Okay. Let's see. Give me 1 second. The next regularly scheduled meeting for the Historic Preservation Commission is Wednesday, March 1st, 2 p.m. right here in Municipal Building of City Council Chambers. New applications for the March meeting were received January 31st. New information on projects continued from today's meeting to the upcoming meeting must be submitted to staff by 4 p.m. Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. The next regularly scheduled workshop for the Historic Preservation Commission is Wednesday, March 8th from 11:30 to 1:30 at 420 West Main Street. Any items from commissioners, as long as you can keep it under 6 minutes? Any items from citizens that wish to be heard? We are adjourned at 3:54.
On the workshop, we have commission